All right, good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and happy Friday. Quick video for Friday. I did not do a midday video today because there just wasn't that much to really talk about and to trade. I wasn't really hyped up about anything today. It was more of a day just to kind of watch. Of course, we had the midday trade headline, which seems like we're getting one of these once a day. But I had some names that I was watching that I had a watch list today, and it just wasn't materializing, and I just wasn't feeling like we were going to have any major momentum today. I thought it might be a little bit of a choppy day. There was bad news with a couple of the semi names reporting yesterday, which I'm going to go over in a second and give my viewpoint on those. But I just thought we might be a little bit troubled, and some of the things that I was looking for to rally more value names today, I was looking for them to kind of move out and up. They just didn't have they didn't trigger for me, so that's fine. Sometimes we're going to get days like that where if you're not quick off the bat and you weren't, a couple traders made some nice money on playing some moves right off the open. I just wasn't focused on those particular names, so that's fine. And I want to make that a point some days where if I just don't think that the opportunity is there, even to scalp, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines and just kind of focus on what I've got going on and stick with the tack that I have and some of the positions that I have on. So I'll start with the S&P chart because I always start there. Yeah, it's very messy. There's a lot of things going on here. We've got the 200-day moving average coming in here again. We had a nice rally day yesterday on Thursday from lows to highs. Really nice day. But this market has been very tricky, and especially within the S&P. The 50-day moving average is also crashing down here, so it could be a little bit of a battle between bears and bulls and bears for a couple days. Next week is a shortened week. If you have not checked out the Tribeca Trade Group and you want to check it out, you could get I think next week would be a great week to check it out because we could go over a little bit more strategy. I think some days will be quiet, but the Friday after Thanksgiving is always everybody always thinks it's going to be a sleeper, and sometimes it ends up being a really good trading day. So maybe we get some volatility, we get some things to move. So let me talk about a couple of names that were in the spotlight, I guess you could say, for today. But I've got some interesting things to talk about. So let me just get this out of the way because I did not trade. I did not trade any of the semis today. We had a couple members play a couple things like AMD. Just thought it was down too much in sympathy with Nvidia. I think this is going to take some time for this name. This name is pretty. I think pretty overcrowded. I think a lot of longs have been in this name. It got pretty washed out. I did not play this name for earnings, but I was, I said it in the room. I just didn't want to kind of throw my idea because sometimes it doesn't work. But I was a little bit, I thought the risk was to the downside for this one. So it did fall apart. It's probably going to spend some time I think repairing, and just like the major indices with the S&P, your bogey, by the way, for this stock I think is going to be 170, 170.28, but it may take some time for that to kind of heal. What I thought was actually more interesting was Applied Materials today. So Applied Materials also had a bad quarter, but the bad news seemed to be with today's market reaction, it came back pretty nicely. So what does that mean when you have bad news and you mention some bad things in your quarter and the stock actually goes up? It usually means the bad news is priced into your stock. So I thought this was really interesting. It was down a lot and it came back and it actually finished higher than yesterday's close. So I would keep an eye on that name. And then if you kind of look around in some of the other semis, it was pretty a surprising day because, the Qs did finish down on the day. They finished down 40 basis points. But all in all, considering that one of like the darlings or the market generals in NASDAQ, NVIDIA got completely obliterated, I think not too bad. So a couple names that we've seen option activity this week was ON Semiconductor, up 2.1% today. This name just seems to be in a world of its own. Xilinx is up over 2% today. So, what weakness in this space. So this just goes to show you that it's, when you look at a group of stocks, sometimes there are names, you just have to kind of find them. I mean, I know that when you look at the overall SMH ETF, it's like, oh, geez, it looks bad. It's in a downtrend. But there's always, and this is why sometimes I am a little bit of optimistic, because I think people will look at this and they'll just say, ah, it's horrible. But if you do your homework, you can find the name that is doing this. Now, I know it's hard. It's not easy. And I'm not in Xilinx, but it just shows you that all is not, it's like the, what Kevin Bacon at the end of Animal House. All is not lost. I mean, this is it's a good example of just what happens in a market. Not every name is going to break down, and clearly there's something pretty interesting going on in this name. I think Qualcomm also got an upgrade this morning, and they did okay. Intel increased their so I'm spending a little bit more time as we're already 6 minutes into the video, but it's interesting what's going on in the semis. Intel up a percentage and a half. It's got to get over that 200-day moving average for me, but it's kind of trying to base in here a little bit after a horrible time with all kinds of security issues and so forth. So I don't know if I'm ready to go into that name. It was on my radar for the day. It was on my watch list. I just could not pull the trigger in this name. So let me go to a couple other things where now things getting a little bit more interesting. But I was, if you've been listening to my videos, you're going to hear a couple things that I've said before. But one of the ones is I've been watching biotech, because biotech is a big gauge of risk on, risk off. It's also to me a leading indicator, just like watching small caps, which I like to do in IWM. But take a look at what happened here. Is it a false breakdown? Could be, because you got a nice divergence here. Notice on this day, after a big run down, this was worrying me pretty decently this week, where the equally weighted biotech ETF broke the October lows, and I was like, oh boy, that could be that everything is going to start to head back to the October lows, which it still could. I don't think that we're completely out of the woods yet, but notice that we made a lower low here. And if you use the RSI, and a lot of people will use this and look for either something that confirms or does not. So you have a divergence here, right? Here we got oversold. Notice here it didn't get as oversold as we did here. So that looks to me like a divergence to me in biotech. And look at it outperform today, up 2.5%. So again, it's a lot of technical damage here that's taken place, but you start to look for different hints and little clues about what's going on down here. And then we can start to look at the individual names within the group. Also, I was looking at XLV today. It moved too quick for me. It was something that was on my radar, but by the time, literally the first five, couple of 5-minute bars, it already took off, and I am not adding risk when a group of stocks is up 1%. It's just not the time to do that. Adding trades at the end of the day is a little bit better. So I'm going to talk about some of today's end-of-day option activity. Let me just talk about a couple themes that I think, you go back to this S&P chart, and again, I'm really, giving you my viewpoint on this stuff. But yes, it's got a lot of technical damage. I said that a couple times now. But again, you're not going to know this is not going to tell you the relationship of what is going on underneath with the 500 stocks. Nowhere is that really going to tell you risk on or risk off. You have to kind of do your own analysis here, and so if you look at, for example, something that I've been talking about for a while is growth versus value. Growth is performing much better here now, and this has been going on for 2 months. And I did a video I had an interview with Real Vision where we talked about a trade idea, and I know it's a couple weeks old, so I think I could talk about it. But yeah, I think about 3 weeks ago. I was also on Bloomberg. You could find me on their ETF IQ segment where I was talking about this. This is now going back, I think, over a month, where I was talking about value is going to start outperforming growth. And we were talking about a couple names in the consumer staples. So this is now trending. This is put in a base. You could draw a channel here, but this has been going on. So yeah, I'm still talking about, I see a lot of other people talking about this now, but I've been talking about it for a while. So this is not me just bringing this up. So it's the same thing with China. And I know if you've been watching my videos this week, it didn't have a big outperformance today, but you watch what happens in the Asian markets, and it's pretty astounding. I think when our markets have been having a little bit of weakness, you could bring up what the markets did last night. So even keep in mind China doesn't open till later at night, but even with the Nvidia results, the Hang Seng and the Shanghai just kind of did their own thing last night and finished in the green. So I just view that they may be putting in a bottom. So let's start to look at a couple charts. Right, this is the relationship between FXI and SPY. Another one, if you want to look at. Where's the Chinese internet ETF versus the US? Let's see how that also, it's got a similar relationship to it. But just to look at, again, KWeb Chinese internet versus US internet, and that's also seems to be at least stopped going down. So, a couple names. We'll start off with the big one, and of course, this video is for information purposes only, but I could tell you what I'm doing here. And I am long BABA, which had an inside day today. So, an inside day, just basically, you really can't draw too much from it. But a chance, if you did not get in my BABA trade yesterday, today you got a little bit of chance. It pulled back a little bit. So that's nice. Of course, I would like to see another big green bar, but it's holding above the neckline. And sometimes these things just take a little bit of time. They don't just go up, completely in a straight line. But I like what's going on here. It's now above the 50-day moving average. If it would have fallen back, and again, I've got my stops. I'm not 100% do or die committed to these trade ideas. If they break down, then I get out of them. But right now I'm in a little bit longer dated calls too. I'm in February, which is not that far out at this point. I can't believe it's we're going to be in December in a couple weeks. But yeah, so I'm in a little bit further out. I'm also in VIP, so I do have some trades on in this space. VIPS, which I did take a target in this today. It's a $5 stock, so I'm not messing with options here. I'm just outright long a $5 stock. Was able to take a target at $6 today, so that's nice. JD reports on Monday, but they've been involved in. I think the CEO was involved in some scandals, so I don't know if I would really set up camp in that one. A couple other, and then if we look at FXI, the biggest ETF, which is a hodgepodge of names, a lot of financial, same thing. You've got a couple things going on here that are positive. So my main view on this, and I talked about Brazil yesterday too, so I won't rehash that. But with all these names, all these country-specific ETFs that are underneath the 200-day moving average. Some of them are going to eventually start and go higher. This is pretty interesting. This is the Indonesia ETF, right? So if you look at the emerging markets one by one, Indonesia seems to be picking up some speed here from the lows at the 200. So that may be all that it does. But 21 to 24 from lows to highs, these names can come back and counter trend rally a little bit. Also, if you look at India, India is also making a little bit of a move here. So it's garnering some interest. And if you look at the whole EEM ETF, that is also coming back to the 50-day moving average again. Now it failed here, and I have not re-entered. So instead, I tried to do something else. But this has me interested. So again, something different. I could tell you. So I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit about the option activity. We saw a nice big block of win calls today. So this kind of also looks like it's trying to put in a bottom. There's some support in here if you look at win on the weekly chart. So again, really beaten up stocks at this point, right? So kind of at this point, just like we're seeing value go up, some of these unloved areas, if you look at this, now of course I don't like how it's, and I did not put on any Wynn or Las Vegas Sands because I think there's a high correlation between China and the casino names, right? They all have casinos. Las Vegas Sands, MLCO, Wynn, they've got exposure to China. They've got big casinos over there. So they're going to move based on that and, of course, amongst other things, other factors too, because they're not solely in China, but they kind of are moving with them. But this has support down here. I'll show you the trade that went up today in Wynn. I mean, chunky stuff. Let's see. I may not work for. Here it is, right here. It was not swept, but this was. Look at this, 3,000 of these. $1.4 million trade that went up in Wynn, and I'm not going to bring up the Las Vegas Sands orders, but we've been seeing those. We've also been seeing. You can see this big green dot here for the Wynn. So yeah, there's some institutional money that's starting to. So for option activity, I do bash option activity sometimes because sometimes the trades just don't work. And the hedge funds are wrong, whoever is buying them. But there has been. It gives me a sense of what they're thinking, what they're doing, and we've seen a lot of Las Vegas Sands calls go up as well. This name also, it's going to look very similar to Wynn. You could see I've got a trend line drawn here. Again, I'm waiting for this. I will be late on it. But it all depends on what you're looking for. If you're just looking for a quick bounce, I will probably wait until this thing gets above, pretty well above its downward trend line, maybe the 50-day moving average. MLCO is another name. I believe it was yesterday I saw some calls. This is MPEL. They're all looking very similar. So they're on my radar. Again, I don't want to. If I own FXI, BABA, and a casino, I'm kind of putting all my eggs in one basket, even though they're different securities. But this is what I think is interesting right now in the market. So for today, even though it was a slow day, I wanted to talk a little bit about the option activity because, as you can see, there was some interest. Like right at the end of the day, people were putting on exposure, which tells me maybe people are expecting a little bit of a rally next week. A little bit of, and some of it's pretty small stuff, but ZS saw some calls. There's actually a little bit of a put buyer in Tesla at the end of the day, but if you go through, there was about 4 or 5 orders that hit. There was another name that I saw right at the end of the day in the last minute. There was a tiny bit of NVIDIA in the last, that was in the last minute, but the last 10 minutes. There was one other name that I saw, but I can't seem to find it. Oh, there was a little bit of Amazon calls right at the end of the day. A $300,000 trade for next week. Just a hundred lot that they bought. I think that was it. But if you go through, just a couple other names that were on my list just to refresh my memory. There was a block of IQ calls. I'm not sure if those were bought. Another China name, I think a little bit riskier of a name. There was a nice order in EW today, Edward Life Sciences. Right, they bought I think a total of over 2,000 of these. This is the 1,000. December 170. This has been a very good name on option activity. Just look at a chart, and then there's a new name too. I'm not going to go over all the names that we saw option activity in today, but it's kind of a funky looking chart at this point. But it's been the last time that we saw this and it was repeat option activity. The thing blasted off to the upside. So a name to watch for next week. Another name that I thought was interesting. What was this thing called? MDB. MDB. Another software name. And here's the one right here. Nice size trade. Now it reports, I think, are the 12th or the 13th. But look at the size trade. 360,000 sweep opening. MDB. Take a look at this chart. So just like we were talking about with the semis, there is some strength out there. So it's not all doom and gloom as everybody seems to want to say. But you got an MACD crossover. This name's trying to break out. pretty nice. I mean, look at this chart. That's really nice. Well, it has to break out. It has to break above resistance. Another name that's on my radar is Mountain. If you're looking for a cold play, not the band Coldplay. Sorry, it is Friday. But made a nice move. We've been watching this in the trading room for the last couple days. Look at the bullish engulfing yesterday, and then look at the follow through above the 50-day moving average. Notice that VPOC up there, 290. Again, it reports in a couple weeks. So usually I like to, for these high price stocks, I like to put on call spreads. Unfortunately, if you put a call spread on now for December, it's not going to realize its value even if it goes up because of the earnings event. This is how it works with options and volatility. So that's also something to watch for next week. There was a little bit of calls. There was a big call order. I don't know if it was 100. I can't tell if it was bought, but there was a decent size Q's call order for June. Again, a lot of two-way stuff, which is basically what's been going on for the whole week. This order was canceled. Here it is. June 173 calls. Notice it was not swept. I did not see implied volatility jump on this order. But look at it. It's a sizable order. $4.7 million in that order for the Qs going at the June. So, some positioning going out a little bit further. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean that the Qs are going to go up next week the way that if you're thinking how they are thinking, that's probably a long-term play that they're looking at. All right, so that's the video is about 20 minutes long, longer than I wanted to talk about, but I think there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of talk about debt. Everybody seems to be talking about debt worries right now. Am I concerned about that? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I think if everybody's talking about it, sometimes it's more hype than anything else. And that's my opinion. We could, credit spreads have widened a bit, but not drastically. So I'm not in panic mode about spreads widening out a little bit. They did move the last week. They've been edging up just about every day. So we'll see. Just one other note about the VIX, moving down. I mentioned it has to drop below this trend line. Dropped all the way down to 18 bucks today, and we'll just check out last chart. We'll just look at a chart of the VIX, but it could be dissipating, maybe possibly volatility coming in a little bit. On the daily chart, it's got to break. If it breaks 1661, I think that's a good sign, but it seems like it's running out of steam, doesn't it? It's been making lower highs. It did actually didn't back here, 1026. It did not make a new high, and then here we got a lower peak, and it's been fading. So something to watch. Again, 16 is a long way away, but if it breaks 16, then that's the trend, broken trend, broken uptrend, I would say. All right, so I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the room. Check us out, Tribeca Trade Group. Just $7 for the first week, and you can cancel at any time. You don't even have to tell me. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend.